Last album of the night, Red Hot Chili Peppers' Californication, released June 8th, 1999. Matt, what are the stats?
Californication comes in number 42 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 3 in 1999, number 209 of all time. It's the Chili Peppers' second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1991's Blood Sugar Sex Magik, which we did cover in a previous episode. Californication comes in at number 286 on Rolling Stone's list, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers are ranked number 71 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
Well, they are from Los Angeles, and they formed in 1982. Believe it or not, Anthony Kiedis on vocals, Flea on bass, John Frusciante on electric guitar, and Chad Smith on drums. This is our third time covering them. We covered their album Mother's Milk back on Season 3, Bonus 23, and their fifth album, Blood Sugar Sex Magik, on Season 4, Episode 10. Mother's Milk was their fourth album, I meant to say. And we also covered a single, Soul to Squeeze, on Season 4, Episode 22 on this singles.
Conehead soundtrack.
Californication is their seventh album. Genres are alt-rock or funk rock. Influences, Bad Brains, Black Flag, the Minutemen, Parliament and Funkadelic, Iggy and the Stooges. Similar artists, Primus, Faith No More, Jane's Addiction, Korn, and Limp Bizkit. Under the Bridge reached number 2 on the Hot 100, and Stadium Arcadium and Unlimited Love, which is their album from 2022, they both reached number 1 on the Billboard 200. This album reached number 3 on the Billboard 200. Some facts about this album. This is John Frusciante's return, as we've talked about at the top of the show and previously. He was on Mother's Milk and Blood Sugar Sex Magik, but then became addicted to cocaine and heroin, and so then he left the band. He was not on, and Dave Navarro came in and replaced him, and Dave Navarro was on One Hot Minute, the album before this. This is their best-selling album with more than 15 million copies worldwide. Frusciante had been in rehab up to this point, and then Flea convinced him to come back in 1998. With Frusciante back, they began to brainstorm ideas about the album. Flea suggested doing an album with electronic influences like U2's Europa, but after being turned down by several producers, including David Bowie, they decided to go back to the alt-rock and their roots of sound.
So they were going to do that, but they couldn't find a producer, so then they switched back. Wow.
That's what it said, yeah.
I'm surprised they couldn't find a producer to go in over that, but okay.
A majority of the music for this album was written in Flea's garage studio. They wrote between 30 and 40 songs during this period, and they whittled it down to 15. Rick Rubin returned as producer for this album after their previous two. He also produced. There was some hesitation by the band, thinking they might want to have a new producer and, kind of trying something new, but then they stuck with him. It took 5 days for them to record the songs for this album, and everyone recorded their instruments at the same time in the same room. In September of 98, they before the album, obviously, they rehearsed and recorded demos at Daniel Lanois' El Teatro Studios in California, and those sessions would eventually become Californication, or the start of it. These sessions were later leaked in 2014 and became known as the Teatro Sessions. So it's all like demos and rehearsal and stuff like that for hardcore fans, I imagine. They started using the internet a lot more to promote this album. Flea engaged with fans online with a series of internet posts called Flea Mail, which he would discuss the recording process, tour dates, and stream of conscious style thoughts about his life. They also performed at various high school proms across the United States shortly before the album as a way to introduce younger audiences to the band.
They should do that now.
Right. The single Scar Tissue spent 16 weeks atop the mainstream rock charts. And as part of their world tour for this album, they were asked to close out Woodstock 99. The band was informed in minutes before arriving that the crowds and bonfires in the Fields Had Gone Out of Control. They performed the cover of Fire by Jimi Hendrix Experience to close out the set, which escalated into violence to property and women, and women were raped. Fire was already scheduled to be performed. This was like previously on the set list and like agreed upon and stuff before they even got there, and was not in response to the fires and chaos. So just as a disclaimer there.
But they asked them to like kind of chill out, right? Like I thought that the organizers were like, "Hey guys, could you help us out?" And they just went out and played. Like they didn't really do much to try to quell the For as much crap as Limp Bizkit got for starting a lot of stuff, I think the Chili Peppers were certainly part of that as well.
Yep. So this was pretty much my introduction to the Chili Peppers, as I've talked about in the past. So what did you guys think of listening to Californication this time? Let's start
Matt,
with...
I'll give you the first take.
Matt.
I want to hear Matt's, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this album, I owned this album and I listened to it quite a bit in college, and I've always liked this album, but it's been a while since I have heard it. So it was kind of interesting going back. And I still like it. I think to me, Blood Sugar Sex Magik is by far a better album than this. I was actually kind of surprised to see this ranked so highly. Not because I think it's a bad album, because I it's for number 47 in the decade. Like or the Chili Peppers are 70 whatever of all time. I'm not feeling that, right? Like I think the Chili Peppers are a good band, and there's quite a number of things, another number of their songs and albums that I do like, but I guess I never got like the overall adulation that seems to come with them. I definitely think this album is interesting for kind of going in a lot of different directions, but still holding very true to who they are. So you've got songs that, it opens up with Around the World. It's classic, funk, guitar, but bass line. It's got this funky kind of rhythm going on. And then you've got like more standard, songs like Scar Tissue is a very kind of nice, pretty, clean sounding, pop song. And then you've got some songs that are a little bit more rock based, like Easily's kind of got this driving, earnest, guitar sound, which is really kind of, which is kind of fun. You've got like Savior's an interesting song. It's kind of like this kind of ballad, but kind of anthemic song that kind of is, I'm not sure exactly what to make of that. And so, and Road Trippin's this nice little, kind of, guitar ditty towards the end. So it's got a lot of different lanes that it's driving through, which generally I like. I think it's a pretty consistent record. But it also seems like this is the beginning of the Chili Peppers going a little like, they're getting older, right? They're becoming more reflective and more like less, I don't know, like teenagery, punk, like frat bros of what they were from the early days of like Freaky Styley and Uplift, Mofo, Party Plan, and even, Blood Sugar Sex Magik. They're becoming a little less cool, a little bit more like dad rock, that's starting to seep in as well, which is fine, right? It's like this is how a lot of artists age, right. And, it's how I'm aging too. So I'm just not making music, but like, so it's probably a bit long. There's some parts here and there where I lose a little interest, but I do appreciate kind of the variety here. That so if there's one type of song that you're not really into, just wait for the next one, because it's probably going to change things up enough. But I also don't feel like it's like sometimes with albums like this, I think I've said before, it feels unfocused. And I wouldn't say that with this record. I would not say that this is an unfocused record. I think this is actually quite focused, but and it's just that it just takes you down different paths, right? Which are fine. Mm-hmm. I think you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I still, what the hell is Anthony Kiedis talking about in any of these songs? I don't know. I don't think the lyrics make a ton of sense here.
I'll talk about that.
So if I'm sure that's probably going to be more off-putting for you guys. So, but again, that doesn't bother me. I do like Anthony Kiedis' voice, and if we're talking, and we've talked the last couple of weeks several times about rap rock and stuff, and a lot of times I'm like, oh, well, like Rage Against the Machine or the Poster Boys, like the guys that really refined it. But I think the Chili Peppers certainly have a lane, have a place in that, as well as doing it well. Really kind of, and I mean, they're definitely throwing more of the funk in there, and maybe that makes that hybrid a little bit more cohesive. But I generally like their vibe. I generally like their sound together. I think Fleas are great. There's a lot of great bass lines here. I think Frusciante's addition back here is really good. It's kind of their sound. One Hot Minute is a unique record, but I do like the different direction that Navarro's guitar playing and kind of where they went there, more rock based. I think that's really good too. So so I think this is a really good stretch of the Chili Peppers, from Blood Sugar Sex Magic, even Mother's Milk, because I like that album as well. So Mother's Milk through this. I never really knew By the Way that much, so but then Stadium Arcadium came after that, and I do remember I got that in grad school when we first started grad school, and I really like that album as well. It's bloated, it's a double album. I would not mind covering it here on the podcast if we get to it, but I think that there's some excellent songs on that as well. That's probably where I stopped listening or caring a whole lot about the Chili Peppers, but this is part of that. But this is part of that that flow of albums, and generally speaking, pretty good. I think. What stood out here, I think Other Side is, of all the singles, I think that's probably my favorite single on this. I really like the way that builds. I like the guitar part. I like the melody. I like the funk down breakdown that they do in the bridge. To me, that's way more interesting than a song like Scar Tissue or Californication, which are fine. I think those songs are fine, but I was kind of surprised at how big they became. I think that there's better songs on here, like Easily, or I Like Dirt. It's kind of a fun song, right?
Yep.
Around the World, I think Parallel Universe, I think all those are better songs than the two biggest songs on here. But probably my favorite single from this is definitely Other Side. I think that's pretty solid. So yeah, I'm thumbs up on it. But I am seeing them lose their fastball a little bit in terms of being interesting, but I also don't fault them for that necessarily. I think it's kind of, I think it's, the natural flow is to like, let's go in different directions. And I think generally speaking, they did a good job with it on this one. So I'm thumbs up.
Yeah, I remember when this album came out, listening to this and going, oh, this is a really interesting album in terms of the choices the Chili Peppers made. And it kind of fit in the narrative of the 90s for the Chili Peppers for me, because Blood Sugar Sex Magic was more focused and introspective than certainly anything they did in the 80s. And then they did One Hot Minute, which, hot take alert, it might be my favorite Chili Peppers album, even though it's a much maligned album. But I love that album. I know it was a very difficult album for them to make, and everybody sort of says they thought it was a failed experiment, but that album kicks ass. And it's probably
I like that album too, John. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably the Red Hot Chili Peppers album I go back to the most, and I liked their earlier albums quite a bit. But so then when this one came out, I'm like, oh, this is the pop album for the Chili Peppers, and John Frusciante's back, so there's that long, winsome guitar that always, I feel like, sounds like All of My Love by Led Zeppelin, but just playing a version of that type of guitar lick, like all the time, is how I always describe John Frusciante's playing. There's a little bit of taking what somebody like Slash does and minimizing it down to vibier version, but it's still that very emotive guitar. He's got a very distinctive guitar sound, so when he's back in the Chili Peppers, you always know he's back. I like it. Like I said, once again, I really liked what Dave Navarro brought to the band, and I know some folks, when they heard him, were like, oof, I don't love this, but I did. So it did seem like a return to the Chili Pepper sound that had been, I guess, the like 88 through 92 version of the band. So it felt vintage in that sense. But what I did not know when that album came out was like that was going to be what the Chili Peppers would be for the rest of their career. Like, because they kind of did the lane that Californication is for the rest of their career. I'm somewhat familiar with the albums that followed this, By the Way, and Californication. Much like Matt, that's kind of where...
Stadium Arcadium.
You mean Stadium?
Sorry, Stadium Arcadium. I'm sorry. What did I say? Permanent Vacation? Californication. I apologize. Yeah. Sorry, wrong shuns along the way. But I actually think this one's the best of this version of the Chili Peppers because I think the quality of the songs is higher. I think Scar Tissue was a song that I immediately liked when I heard it originally. Now it's become huge, so it falls into that lane of that we've talked about in the 90s, but there's a song you like and then you hear it too much and you're not sure if you like it anymore. Mm-hmm. We talked about that with the Lenny Kravitz song. We talked about it with Fastball a couple weeks ago. Or actually last week we talked about that with The Way, how Josh and I came back around to it. But because of that, these songs, Other Side, Around the World, Scar Tissue, I thought Blood Sugar Sex Magic was played a lot, and it was. I feel like those songs might have even been played more than the Blood Sugar Sex Magic songs in terms of on the radio, because they were more versatile. They could go on adult contemporary, modern alternative. When I say adult contemporary, the adult contemporary rock, right? Not the singing version of it. But this is when the Chili Peppers become versatile. This is when they become elder statesmen. Interestingly, Matt, there are some focused Anthony Kiedis lyrics here. Like Californication's probably one of the few songs where I kind of like what he does lyrically. It's an interesting... Anthony Kiedis's style works very well with that type of song about like the Californianess of the world. He kind of oddly embodies that perfectly in that. And Scar Tissue is another one that's a focus song. I know that Emmett Remus is about one of the Spice Girls who he was dating, and that one has some lyrics. So you could follow his themes. It's always funny to me because Anthony Kiedis will always talk about his lyrics, and he's like, this song is, and he'll go into this deep story, and you're like, how, that song can't be about all that. It's just nonsense words. But there are thematic connections here, Matt. So I'd say this is some of his better lyric writing, but, and I do put a significant but, there is a lot of songs that sound like some semblance of abba-dabba-hamba, abba-dabba-amba, like, and it's like it might as well be onomatopoeias just coming back at me, because unlike Eminem, who is going for that sound, the way Anthony like the sounds, right? And like having the inverse, but you're also paying attention. I think sometimes like I process Anthony Kiedis' lyrics as just onomatopoeias that sound like some semblance of words that end with A's.
Yeah. I mean, he actually says that.
Yeah, I was about to say, there's even some songs exactly where it's like bing bong bing bang. Yeah, it's like, oh my God, yeah. I just... that version of Anthony Kiedis is not my favorite version of Anthony Kiedis. And I do feel this era of the band this is the first album where that part of like Anthony Kiedis is singing like hit me over the head, because if you remember, Matt, and Josh, I don't know how familiar you are with One Hot Minute.
Not at all. Yeah.
That's another album that has very interesting lyrics. They're not direct, but I think it works because he's in a dark place, and that the band's in a dark place in that album. And that album was the Chili Peppers if they were as serious as the Chili Peppers get, right? And I thought that was a really hot take alert. I thought that was a really interesting era for the Chili Peppers, at least in terms of humanness. Before that, they were kind of wild and insane party, existential. And then they did that album and they were like real for a while. And oh shit, like shit's getting real for the Chili Peppers. And then it was this version of the Chili Peppers, which is like a weird adult contemporary rock band. They're better than that. I'd like to say that. Like, I don't mean to minimize it. This is a very polished, very solid album. So I don't mean to minimize it. It's just weird that the Chili Peppers became, I guess in some ways it's like what happened with Green Day, but I think you could almost have guessed that Green Day as elder statesmen would kind of become more respectable, I'd say. It is weird to see the Chili Peppers. You feel like the Chili Peppers could go to a dinner party now, which is such an odd version of the Chili Peppers.
They're like 60 now, probably.
But I mean, at the Californication album,
but still.
I feel like they're aging into like being, respectable company, and I'm like, there's still plenty.
They've come a long way from socks on their penises, like.
I mean, there's always going to be things about them that are like, that is an alarmingly young girlfriend, Anthony Kiedis, but like elements that they're never going to be like fully. Integrated into like mainstream society. But it is funny that they're the band that made it through the 80s and 90s and all of them lived to be old. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's what you would, obviously I know that one of their original guitarists died early. So they, if you go off the original, they didn't all live to be old, but you get what I'm saying.
I thought this was a solid album also. I think, to your point, I think it's inevitable that bands like this have to take a more, as they age.
I thought you hated this album, Josh. I was expecting a visceral take.
So
did you know it before?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I think, like I said,
I'm sorry. I thought you said it was this. What would you say? This was the introduction to the Chili Peppers.
So this, when let me clarify. Like the
Okay.
singles on this album, basically,
Got
were
it.
like my introduction to that. I never went back and like listened to their earlier albums. I mean, I knew some of their earlier singles, but like Under the Bridge and stuff. But this was kind of like, you know, hearing them on the radio. It was like, this is so. So point being is that like I never really liked them that much. Obviously, and now that we've gone back, and I really like Mother's Milk and Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and so I think my main takeaway from this album is that I just don't like the singles on this album. Like Scar Tissue and Californication Other Side are like kind of my least favorite. I don't like kind of when they do like the ballad type stuff, and I just really don't like those songs, and they have not, for me, come back around to me liking them again. I just like, I don't think I need to listen to Scar Tissue like ever again. Like I just really don't like that song, and I didn't really like it when it first came out. And so I like when they are more, you know, when they're more funky, when they're more rock, not like when they've taken the edges off and they're like philosophical or like spiritual or whatever. And so listening to the album, it just made me appreciate the rest of the album more, and I can like now say, okay, it's just these singles that kind of like colored my view of like the band and like what they were about, and made me appreciate them less. I like I said, when they go harder, like Get on Top, I thought that was pretty good song. And more funky, I like, you said Easily. I liked Dirt a lot. It's also interesting because they do different things, like on Savior. That's kind of like a real like weird like psychedelic song, and they like kind of jam out a bit more on that one. That was an interesting departure because it really kind of reminded me of like Doors or like early other 60s stuff that we talked about early on. I liked what else did I say? Yeah, so I liked a lot of the other songs much more. Parallel Universe, that was another one I really liked. But yeah, I mean, to your guys' point, I think this is them just getting older. Some of the edge is coming off. They're not as crazy as they were, but this is still a solid record overall. I haven't listened to, now I'm curious about One Hot Minute since you guys like it so much, but it's going to be hard. I don't think they'll ever.
Sounds very little like this album.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Okay, so
Josh.
that's good.
Yeah.
But it's going to be hard for, as much as I loved Mother's Milk and Blood Sugar Sex Magic, there's no way that they're going to like repeat the heights of that. I feel like that's kind of like the peak. I mean, one of those albums will probably be, well, not Mother's Milk because that was in the 80s, but Blood Sugar Sex Magic might be on my like best of the decade. I don't know. I like it that much, but so yeah, I guess ultimately I probably gave them short shrift based on what I heard at this time, the singles, and they deserved a more better listen. And I'm interested to see kind of like the further evolution if we talk about like these, if we talk about Stadium Arcadium or the album that comes out before that one.
By the way,
so yeah, it's interesting. You know, just thinking about this now, like with this record, because there was a time when Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out, and I bought that record. Like that was, in some ways, that was a dangerous record for me because it represented going in this other direction. You know, and actually, we're going to cover another album next week. This
really
is going to be a
funny.
nice. Next week there's a similar. We're going to be covering Nine Inch Nails, The Fragile, right? And so these were albums that when I got, I was like, I think I want to do this, but like I don't know, like you know, this is going to be for me, you know. And then I got it, and it became like this anthemic like album, this cornerstone of my teenage years. It was such a like a big record for me, and then you compare that feeling that I had buying that record with like with this, right, and what the Chili Peppers ended up becoming, which you know, it's so funny, you know, how it's just like it's not dangerous at all, you know. Right. So it's funny thinking about that now.
It's also funny that Blood Sugar Sex Magic was your dangerous album, Matt, because I grew up going to two friends' houses who had older brothers that were skaters, and so at about age 7 is when I heard Freaky Styley for the first time from the Chili Peppers and Uplift Mofo Party Plan, and that sounded like crazy music. It's some of the earliest music I can remember being interested in that sounded nothing like what I'd been fed, right? You know,
yeah.
because this would have been like 6 or 7, right? And I'm
Right.
like, I don't quite understand this, but I know I like this. And like at 7, and I remember next to nothing about long-term details and stuff, but I remember hearing the Chili Peppers and being like, ooh, that's edgy music. When Blood Sugar Sex Magik came out, I'm like, oh, they've evened out their sound a little bit and made like a very accessible album. So I just remember thinking of that when I listened to it for the first time.
I think part of that was too because
grand old age of 12.
Yeah, and I was aware of, like, I remember I saw a video for Higher Ground where they're like going nuts and stuff, and so I think in part of that was like expecting that album to be more like that, you know what I mean? But like I think that's
you saw Kiedis in the jeans and shirtless and we're like, wow, edgy dude. I saw him, I'm like, wow, he's got pants on.
Yeah. Yes, that was before I knew about the socks thing. So yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, it is funny how like they did seem to my like 8-year-old, 9-year-old, they seemed like the single edgiest, like most adult band ever
crazy
when I was 9. Yeah, because they'd watch the videos and you'd hear it and you're like, holy, this is chaos, right? Like, and you know, you're not listening to a lot of chaotic music when you're 8 or 9 like I was. You're listening to like hot cross buns, you know, like in music class, and the purest of pop, you know, that's what you're getting.
EP, the
very traditional. Matt would love it. It's a lot of melody, like not a lot of edge.
This land is your land.
Yeah, not a lot of edge, a lot of melody. I needed more though, Matt, so I gravitated to that. Okay.